Hello, people. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome Gerry back. He's going to have some interesting information for you about the work he's been doing. So hopefully it's going to help a lot of you parents out there. So how are you doing, Gerry?
I'm doing fine, mate. Thanks to you guys supporting us and everything that we do. And we're obviously supporting you with your protest marches and all the activities that you're getting on with. Been brilliant. We're making progress. I can tell you, we are making progress. I can tell that because people are getting scared.
They are getting scared. We don't get any publicity, do we, Gerry?
Yeah, I know. You get all the negative stuff. I was wondering, you know, when you were on that protest and I saw the video on YouTube and stuff, that was marvelous. And then it suddenly, when you start making inquiries as to why is this not reported, there was something that came up. And I'll explain why in a minute, but there was something that came up, and it turns out there could be a very strong possibility of a D notice. A D notice is what they put on stuff, anything that's newsworthy, but it is a threat to national security. Why are we a threat to national security? What the hell's going on with that? That's if it is a D notice, but there's certainly. I've met, I might have told you this before, but I've met with the directors of Newsnight and Panorama. Two directors. One was called Jonathan, the other one was called Gabriel, and there was a journalist called Yasminara Khan. And I've been keeping Yasminara informed about all these things that were going on right when before we even called them grooming gangs. I was in touch with Yasminara, telling her what was going on. And nothing was ever done. Nothing was ever reported. I never saw anything at all. The only thing they were interested in was Tommy Robinson. Now, I have nothing to do with Tommy Robinson, but I know people who do. So, I mean, if I really did want to get a message across, I told them, I said, I can get a message across if you want me to, but I don't have a direct line to him or anything like that. And anyway, they said they were trying to get looking for faults with him, and I said no, you're going to, and it's a bit sort of like foretelling the future for the BBC. I says, if you don't confront these people, you're going to finish up in trouble. And sure enough, now people are stopping to pay their license. I said, all you have to do is just give him 10 minutes to explain without using the word racist, and he will explain exactly what he's trying to achieve. And anyway, they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't let me do that. It was funny because the guy that was talking about, who was in touch with him, I got a text message from him while I was in there, and it was a big long text message. And so I said, I'll read it to you, obviously leaving out the guy's ID, but I read it to him, and it was more or less calling him a set of tossers and all the rest of it in this text message. And he's saying, you know, don't let them take you into, you know, like, you know how they guide you into a conversation to say, you know, but there was nothing to admit, so I was quite safe with that one. But
Gerry, when I got involved with Justice for Women and Children in Sunderland, I went with the first demo at the beginning of July, end of June, beginning of July. By December, BBC did a Newsnight programme on us about we were the first far-right women's group, and we were talking about so we're making us out to be racist, but actually they couldn't prove we were racist in any way because we weren't. We were talking about all child abuse, all rape, all perpetrators, all victims, but the BBC obviously wanted to damn us, and that's the reason I didn't go through with my tribunal against work for stacking me, you know, for talking about it, because I think that they were planning to use that against me, you know, just to discredit me, because that's what they do, don't they? They try to discredit you so that people don't listen to you.
That's right.
But I've not done anything to be discredited for. And so they don't say an awful lot about me now, because I think it's a case that if we don't talk about draw attention to them, nobody will listen, you know. But there's a
But,
lot more people now talking out, isn't there? All these light workers are coming out of the woodwork.
They're getting a lot more, and I'm sure more whistleblowers will come forward. Maybe they're tied by the Official Secrets Act, and they can't get put in jail for anything like that. So you've got to understand they can't do it directly. They could do it, you know, if there was a trusted source, maybe they could take these messages. Getting back to this thing about, I put a post on LinkedIn today, and I was saying in this that women would be put in jail for making false accusations of rape or sexual molested, or you know, or sexism. Even they could, you know, they could be in trouble. It's very, very serious trouble, possibly facing a prison sentence if we're just making this stuff off the top of their head. Now, okay, that's a good thing, because it makes sure that if a case goes to court, it's a genuine case. Because what woman would risk that? So so that's one good thing about it. But when it comes to racism, that's a different thing. Now, Donald Trump has done something about that. He's outlawing it in America, and we should have it outlawed here. To accuse people like you of racism is absolutely appalling. And it's divisive, you know, and there's nothing to gain from it other than to make the entire nation look. It's just so ridiculous. It really winds me up that how come if a woman was to say you're a rapist, my God, I'd be going berserk. But that was but racism, they can get away with it.
They show the harm, don't they, by who they protect. Who are you not allowed to talk about? What are you not allowed to talk about? Those are the issues. Those are the people that, you know, are controlling everything. Those are the type of people controlling everything, because they're protecting their own interests. So when you look at who the assault notes against, you know, obviously you can only be racist if you're white, can't you, really? Or English, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, so, that's it, or British, yeah. There were a guy. It was when I was. I'll very quickly with this one. But when I was a student, there was a guy, and he was actually raping girls in the college. In the local newspaper, it was in Bradford, Telegraph and Argus. The only way they could identify this guy was that he was quite tall and well built. So another girl gets raped. Listen to this. Another girl gets raped the following day, whenever it was. Sure enough, it comes up again in the newspaper. Well, he was tall and he was broad, and he wore a signet ring. I mean, at the time they were in fashion, so that sort of narrowed it down to about 20 million who were over 5'6". Anyway, so then they narrowed, and it was only that was the next thing, was that he wore overalls. Well, that was like every mechanic and engineer in the place that was included in this. And then eventually they got to say, they did eventually admit, after all these girls had been raped, they eventually said it was a big Jamaican-looking guy, a West Indian or something like that, heritage. But that's ridiculous. When you've got a choice between being accused of racism or stopping somebody from raping young girls, what the hell? What does that come into? And what category do you put? How do you equate it? How do you sleep with that at night? Like with the children and the Rotherham gangs and everything else. What it's going to tell you is that we've had a tip-off about, I think you might have seen it on Facebook, but we've had a tip-off about a social worker with links to the Middle East. This is a manager, and he's linked with I think it's Manchester, Essex, and, oh gosh, I can't remember the rest now. In the Northwest, and it may have been Newcastle. I'm not sure how far up it went, but it was definitely Manchester, you know, all these things. And it's his links with 2 organizations linked to the Middle East. That's obviously where those children are going. All the stuff that I deal with, and I'm getting into the courts with this, and it's one of the things I'm going to tell you is that I'm actually taking part in hearings where I can give a statement, I can speak as on behalf of the child as an expert witness, which they should have in every court. They should have somebody like me in every court. So, but they don't. It's just the man and the woman, you know, the child is no saying it. I mean, Kafkas, I mean, come on, they're social services, gun dogs or whatever, you know, they're not going to be independent of the child's interest at heart. They're going to do whatever they're told to do.
I don't think, Gerry, anybody, the solicitors, the courts, the Kafkas, anybody, they're all linked together, aren't they? None of them are independent. They're all feeding from the same trough, and that child is providing that what goes in that trough, isn't it? It's
when they meet in the judges' chambers, I think they call it. They have a meeting in camera, I think it's called. But they have a meeting beforehand, and they more or less say, what outcome do you want, Mr. Social Services? And they say, oh well, we want that woman's baby. And so they say, well, okay, well, you'll have to tell me, they talk to the solicitors, you'll have to tell me that she's got a risk of future harm and that she likes violent men, like you go out looking for them, like, yeah. So, and she leads to a violent relationship and all this rubbish that you hear in court with people saying, and it's all pre-rehearsed and pre-arranged. So as soon as you go in, you're going to lose your child no matter what. This is what I'm going to tell you now. We have the support of a private investigator.
Brilliant.
So he's looking at, he's obviously he's doing this for free, but it's mainly to find the underlying causes. You know what you were saying about stuff not getting reported or not. So he's looking at all that stuff, and he'll probably get back to me soon. The other thing is, we've found a way of dealing with social services and stopping them in their tracks.
Yeah.
Because we put them into a position, each social worker, we put them into a position. I know I probably said this before 100 times, but Napoleon, never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. And like you're saying there, everything's prearranged before you go in. So when we go into the court, when it goes into the court, they have to actually tell lies or tell stuff or exaggerate the truth or talk about trivia as if it's something serious. So they'll talk about stuff like this. I mean, some of it is so laughable, it's funny. Well, I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh. I better not say too much because I might be giving somebody away by saying these things. But like one woman, she just told me, she said, they said my husband was an alcoholic. She said he's a Mormon, he doesn't even drink coffee. Oh, where do these people get their information?
The lies that they tell, Gerry, are so blatant, though, aren't they?
I know. And
they make suggestions in the
court.
They've no shame. They've no shame whatsoever.
Nothing whatsoever. Anyway, these people, so these lies and everything, we just let them go. Never interrupt your enemy. So, okay, let them go. Let them say what they want to say. And you can say, oh, that's not true, but, you know, it's not going to make any difference. So, after the court case, bring them here. I want to see them because I want the social worker's report. And I want the parent to go through that social worker's report, find out all the lies, untruths, what's conjecture, what's made up, what's fairy stories, all that. But we need, before we write the letter, we just need the top 3 or 4 that have got unequivocal evidence. Like, for instance, with that woman, like, this was said in the report, my husband was an alcoholic, and this is pictured outside, you know, with some of the other Mormons, you know, a meeting or something, attending a Mormon church or whatever, or pictures of a Mormon wedding. Anything like that is absolute proof. That's gold. That's gold. But there's lots of things that you'll find that they've been so blatantly stupid and ridiculous. It's unequivocal evidence that the court was misled. So then you've got the position. You've got people in a position to say, well, yes, I was lying to the court. And then the social work manager's got to stand in. This is in a civil court. They would have to admit, well, yes, I knew they were lying. I let it go. It was okay. They're not going to do that. They're going to get in touch with the parent and say, look, this is called a action protocol. Okay, you can have them for different things, but it's just warning people that you're about to take action. And so we get this pre-action protocol in the process. One, to get a judicial review, in other words, to go back to court, the parent must do that. We can show them what to do, the template letters and stuff like that. We can send them all that, and they can do their own pre. I'm going to be training volunteers to do this, by the way. I'll put it online because this is child protection. It's not about taking all the glory or whatever. It's about keeping kids safe. So I'm going to put this online for everybody to use it. It's a pre-action protocol letter for a judicial review. You've only got a time scale of about 3 months, I think it is. So you must be pretty quick. And you write this, all the list of all the lies that they've told you, that they told the court, write them all down, and just the top 3 or 4 where you've got unequivocal evidence, just go into detail about that, because if I tell you the truth, if it's too long, they won't read it. But just give them the gist of all the rest of it. And also, by the way, you lied about this. This was not true. This was a pure speculation. But we'll teach people how to do that on the video. But this it then puts the managers into a position where they have to take action to stop you or the parent going back to the judge with this. They're going to apply to the court to have the last order revoked, not you or the parent, because they're in a very, very difficult position where they can either admit the truth, in which case they're damned, or they can deny the truth, in which case they'll be damned. So they've only got one option left, which is to go back to the parent and say, well, actually, you know, this idea we had about taking your child away from you, well, what about if we have another look at this? This is what they do. Our record with this is 22 hours. And it was very, very brief letter. It's just a template letter. It's very simple to do, but you just got to be careful. So I'm going to do a video. Don't even attempt it until you've seen the video. But this is one thing I want to share with everybody, how to do this to get a judicial review. The other one, it does need somebody with qualifications, and that's to take the social worker or to threaten the social worker with civil action. Now, I've got people into the wrong idea about this, and I'm so sorry for people who've been misled by me not describing it properly. I can't just come in at the last minute like these dramas, you know, they have about courtroom dramas, and sort of swoop in with my stories and tales of woe and everything else, because it's not going to work like that. They're just going to laugh at me. So the hell do you think you are? And so I've got to be involved with it before I'll actually write it. Lots of reasons, but one of the reasons that it does bother me is because some people have just been chancing their arm as it is, and they've been taking the mickey, really. We're a charity, but we're only publicly funded for helping parents with learning difficulties, you know, and have trouble understanding things. And people in extreme poverty, like, you know, some people who just got nothing, they're homeless or in the streets or whatever. So anyone else, all we're asking is just a couple of quid a week towards the run. You know, I want to train my volunteers. I want them to, you know, to give them some sort of hope of employment in the future. So it's just to cover those things and insurance.
I know as well, Gerry, that you do an awful lot of work in your own time. Yeah, voluntarily, you know, going to court with people, helping them write whatever they need to write, being a witness. You're doing that as to help the solicitors to help you out, isn't it?
Yeah,
all of that.
It is.
You're doing that so that they can help these parents, because without that expertise, that what is it you call it? I know your qualifications are pretty good, aren't they?
I know.
You know,
that's
witness.
That's where it's. I'm glad you mentioned that bit, because that's the crucial part that I want to mention. If anybody's child has been abused, this is what the charity was started up for originally. So any child or woman or a man who's been abused in the past whilst they were under social services care, we have specialist lawyer who's worked on grooming gangs, victims, all those kind of cases, some very, very high profile cases. And he works with us on a no win, no fee basis. And when I first talked to him about the charity and what I wanted him for, he said, yes, we do work no win, no fee. But he said, the problem is when you get to court, in order to back up the claim, you need an expert witness, and they cost like £4,000. I said, no, they don't. I'm an expert witness. I'll do it for nothing. So I'll do that. If it's going to get a kid, or get some, get sort something, I'll do it no win, no fee as well. So because that way the court pays for it, you see, or the other party, whichever it happens to be. So that means that we really do, it has to be a rock solid case, unequivocal evidence, medical records. I don't want to see any photographs. I don't want to see any evidence of anything like this at all. It goes straight to the solicitor, not me. Don't ever send me anything like that. I'll just delete it straight away without looking. But,
that's a stumbling block, isn't it, Gerry? That's a stumbling block. I think a lot of parents withhold information, or they don't have enough evidence, or they have their view on what happened, but they've not kept the records that they needed to keep.
That's where you guys come in. That's where you guys come in, because they need somebody they can trust. And that's obviously when you're out there in the open on Facebook. If you do one thing wrong, it'll be all over Facebook. So they can trust you because you're open and honest about everything that you do. So you can say, yeah, that's valid evidence. Gerry, get your expert witness hat on. And we'll, between us, we'll put a case together that can go to the court. And so that's the only thing really that we need, is just evidence every time. And then we'll run with it.
What would you advise the parents, especially because we've talked, haven't we, about how when this initially happens, when they start getting visits from social workers, or they come around, start gathering evidence, or parents ask for help, and they jump through all the hoops, and then they turn it against them and use it to strip the family apart. And
that's right, yeah.
I think that, what advice would you give to parents on how to deal with them? Because a lot of them are rabbit in headlights, aren't they? They need to be.
You don't know what to expect, yeah.
You don't expect a social worker to tell lies if you've never dealt with a social worker before. You don't expect them, you're left feeling like, what the hell is going on? I'm a good parent 60% of the time. In a lot of cases, that's enough. Right. You know what I mean? It's like, so what's the problem? And why are they trying to take my child? Why are they preventing me from moving on in my life? Why are they dictating to me about which parent they can see the child? And why are they trying to get me to split up from my family and my pet and my partner to try and win my child back? In all of these scenarios that you don't understand that they would even happen unless you've actually been through it, and that by then it's often too late. And I just say to everybody, as soon as you've got any involvement, record everything, film it, voice record, phone calls, letters, emails, do everything by email if you want to correspond with them, do as much as you can, because then it's on record. Ask the questions, put in for freedom of information request. What about the individual social workers? Because I've been saying for the last couple of years, if we start taking them through the civil court, which you need a hard, fully, the case has to be rock solid, as you say. Once we start doing that and winning, that sends a big message out to how they work in social work. And if they want to be that person who's lying in order to take a child from a family without ever supporting them in the way that they need the support, I've asked for the support. So it's an unfair system, as we know, and it's corrupt, really, and it's all about money, and it's greed and just narcissists are running the show. And so what advice would you give to parents as soon as there's any involvement or any concerns or anything like that?
I would take a volunteer from such as your own organisation or somebody local. I would take somebody of them and use them as a witness, or just to keep an eye on things, just as a witness to what actually went on in court. So
can I stop you there though? A lot of cases that I hear of, the person that's there to support that parent, the parent's getting told that person's not allowed to be there, right?
They can't do that.
And I know
if
that
it's
that's
emotional,
not true.
yeah, but it's not true. They need that emotional support. Of course they do. That's
But they
totally
try to
unfair.
bully the parent. If they don't want that person there supporting that, it might be a young parent.
Yeah.
They tell them, oh no, they're not allowed in the meeting, and people believe that, don't they? And
Yeah.
they have to put the foot down and say, no, I want this person supporting me in this meeting.
Yeah.
They have to put the foot down, not be scared of them.
Yeah. You have to play it a bit like my uncle was a semi-professional boxer, and you have to play it a bit like he would play it, and like Muhammad Ali usually kind of play. It's actually a competition, but they're going in. If they're going into an opponent where they know they're more likely to lose if they go out full blast all the time, it's just to sort of sit back, defend yourself, obviously, but just watch what the moves are. Now, when you go into court, you will know what the moves are and what they're actually saying about you. So when you come to doing a judicial review and you apply for a judicial review, use this pre-action protocol system that we have. So use that to get a judicial review, have the evidence checked by one of the volunteers, one of your volunteers, and then block everything that they've said. For instance, if they said, well, you're not fit to parent, okay, get a risk assessment off us. We don't look at you the way you move or anything. We just, in your own time, you do your own, and it's a peer review. You know, it's a parent talks to a parent. That's the way it works. There's nobody in charge, and there's nobody super qualified or whatever. It's just two parents chatting about how they keep their kids interested, entertained, and how they encourage them, and all these sort of things that the parents do anyway. But we get that, and then if they need, it depends on the level of support, because this is something that's just come out I want to share with people. We can get, if they say, well, like we have a woman with learning difficulties I'm particularly concerned with at the minute, because she's very, very, very vulnerable, but she's getting plenty of support at the minute, which is brilliant, from her local community, volunteer services and people like that. All I did, Sharon, was on through Facebook, I says, anybody from this particular town, luckily it's a small town, anybody from this particular town can get in, that can help this young woman if we get our children back. I was inundated.
Yeah.
Come on, I mean, who's going to say no? I wouldn't. Of course you would. So, right, that's one thing we've got. But I've got to tell you, this was in Scotland, and her solicitor is brilliant. He's fully supporting her, and the local social services have been very reasonable. I'll say that. They haven't been like, one of them got really cross with me. She says, we're not like the bloody English social workers. Oops, I'm sorry. And here's one that will shock you. I was, because somebody was imitating or pretending to work for the charity, and they weren't, it got us in. And I naturally wrote to the social work manager and said, look, if you know of anyone else who's been involved with this person, the charity will, of course, help them for free, support them for free. And we won't ask for a donation or anything at all. And anyway, she seemed quite impressed with that, because she got back to me on the phone. And I says, I'm wanting to introduce the charity to Scotland. And she says, well, who's funding you? And I said, oh, we don't get funding because we're too controversial. I says, we're taking social workers to court for corruption. So she went, well, she said, if any of my social workers are corrupting anything, I want to be the first person to hear about it. She said, I would welcome your charity in here, this particular region of Scotland. So I thought, that is fantastic. Also, I've noticed that when I'm talking about corruption and things, there are lots and lots of interest from Scotland, because they want to know, maybe they've got a problem with it, I don't know, but they seem very, very interested in what we're doing as regards to corruption. Now, that's where you and I have to be very, very careful, Sharon, because you and I and people like us, others on Facebook and, the social media, we're out there in the open, we're fully exposed. We're stood there in our underpants, right? So, I mean, if we make any mistakes, they're going to hear about it, and the whole world's going to hear about it. So people trust us for that. And we have that power of trust. people don't trust social services, they don't trust the police, they don't trust the government, they don't trust anybody.
With good
Find
reason.
somebody. Yeah, but they do trust people like us. Now that gives us immense power. So we do, all of us who are involved with this, we do have to be very, very careful. We're supporting each other, and that's what they don't like. I'm saying to you, you know, you have a look at parents and tell them, well, they've got check their evidence and all that, and then somebody else will be pretty good at, like, say, people who are going through a lot of stress and emotions and all these things. And to give them that kind of strength and confidence, that takes a special kind of person. Not me, but it takes a special kind of person with the patience and everything. I'll be honest with you. I've been on the phone this morning. I'm thinking, God, I can't do with this character at all. I really need somebody to help me with people like this. But I have to admit, yeah, I'm not sweetness and light to everybody, and I do get cross.
We all have our roles, don't we, Gerry? We all have a role to play, and I think
exactly the word, yeah.
And this network that we've building up, you know, Children Matter and all, like there's a lot of groups all joining in, and you know, just to see the Save Our Children and Fight for Freedom and whatever the people are getting out in the street for at the moment to fight for, it's the citizens coming together. And I think, you know, they will get around to seeing the assault on our children through the education system, through the social care system, everything like that. So people are coming around to it and saying no. You know, they've violated their positions for so long now, interrupting family life and you know, just going into families and taking complete control, and these COVID measures, that they're even worse.
Oh God, so
when you look at Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, it's a bit, you know, it's like, oh, this is when they're talking about what it used to be like, as in what it's like now in sexual freedom and things, and how they promoted paedophilia to a point where the children think it's bizarre that they didn't do things like that a few years ago as children, you know, and this is where I see it going. It's they're blatant with it now, you know, they're blatantly putting things on dolls and symbols, and they're blatantly putting the clothing out there in the shops, and this Cuties movie and all of this sort of thing. And now there seems to be a lot of people try to snatch children from pushchairs and mothers' arms and in shopping centres and anywhere, and drag them off the street into cars and vans and stuff. And that seems to have accelerated in the last few weeks. It's like, are they running out of children to sell or something? What is, you know, as
COVID, they're not getting about so much. The two what they had in Bradford, this is what you should all look out for. Everyone should look out for. First of all, you've got to distinguish between a political cause and a charitable cause. Being black is not a disability. That's not a charitable cause. I mean, I think I've said this before, but I can imagine if somebody says, oh, Gerry, we're having a charity for people who are badly affected by Scottishness. I would have something to say about that one. What do you mean disabled? Okay, the fried Mars, deep fried Mars bars. Okay, I'll take that one, but you draw the line at disabled. Anyway, but to the point is that we must with distinguish between political groups and even feminism. I mean, being a woman is not a disability because it should.
Feminazism, that is, Gerry. Feminazi is the
I mean, God, they should go to Glasgow and see the women there. It's a quick, funny one that they've actually. I read about the papers a while ago now when I read about it, but apparently this guy was cornered in what they call a close. It's like space in between tenements, and they beat the hell out of this guy, and it was in such a way they smashed his phone, and it was in such a way that he was crying out for help. Anyway, he complained that they took the police and the ambulance over half an hour to find him. The reason for that was because nobody bothered. They knew he was a kiddie fiddler, so they left him. But that was all women that did that. It injured him in such a way that he couldn't even walk. I can only imagine what they did to him. But whatever it was, he couldn't walk after it. Okay, no, I'm not saying vigilante is a good idea, but
as well, have you noticed how many are standing up now and speaking out? How many women are leading in these groups and setting up more and more groups? The mothers are joining forces and coming out.
But they should be joining really with the
more.
fathers, because when you start talking about women only, you're dividing the country in two. Straight away, you've got half the population that would die, and they have died to protect women and children.
When I was first going out on demos,
you can't exclude them.
No, when I was first going out on demos, it was either for the veterans or if it was organised by the football lads or whatever, for whichever reason, it was majority of men. And I used to say, come on, women, we've got to get out in the street. So for me,
enjoying them,
it's just, and I think some toxicity gets into each group, and then they all sort of kind of divide and fall out, and then it goes public and they get discredited. But I think the more women coming out, the men then can come out supporting us, and but for me, there's more women coming out on the streets now than there was a couple of years ago, which for me is a danger.
That is a danger when you start politicizing it like that, whether it's men, women, or whatever they happen to be, gay rights, or all these different things. It's actually distracting from the point. The point is, it's children. That's when you want to know how they are targeting your children, or what is, or how they're doing it, and who is doing it. You should look for the charities that interact directly, or any organisation that interacts directly with a child. I just had a conflict with an organisation because one of the people who worked for them, I mean, they do a fantastic job, I don't deny that, but one of the people who worked for them, he spoke to a 14-year-old girl, and I stopped the conversation right there. I said, what do you mean you spoke to a 14-year-old girl? Anyway, went into some kind of explanation. I said, I'm sorry, disassociate yourself with this charity as from now. You do not. All the years that I've been doing this, I've never found an excuse to talk to a child. So anyone, and there was another one that I actually reported it to the MP, and they stopped it immediately. They stopped it in its tracks. A city with a history of grooming gangs, etc. And this was a project to provide food for poor children. That sounds very noble, etc. But there is no such thing as poverty and as food. Okay, people talk about food poverty, but it's fictitious. It's totally and completely made up. If you are ever short of food, if a child, especially if a child is ever short of food, I'll tell you how I know this. When the Eastern European migrants, when they all came over en masse, the government said to Bradford, for every migrant that you take in from Slovakia and Slovenia and all these different places in the Baltics, if all these different places, Eastern Europeans, we will give you so much money per week to look after them. So they were coming off in droves on the trains. And I remember being at the top of near Foster Square station in Bradford with a phone. I actually had 3 phones trying to get them somewhere to move to because the batteries were running out so quickly. And this was a nightmare. They didn't know where to live. The Sikh Gurdwara opened their doors. All the Sikhs opened their doors, and all the children were in, washed, cleaned, fed, everything, entertained, the lot. Nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with Sikhism. It was just what they did. Restaurants.
The Sikhs are wonderful like that, aren't they?
Yeah, restaurants were bringing food by the van load. Warm, hot, nice meals for the kids by the van load. So you cannot say that we have a problem with children starving. No, that's not the. You just look for. So anything like that that's targeting children, there's just absolutely no need for it.
I don't trust any of them. I don't trust Bernardo's. I don't trust Childline. I don't trust any of them. No. I've heard too many stories from people that have maybe tried to get help through Childline. A young girl that was trying to get help, she got nothing back from them. I think it's just a filter system to find out who's getting grassed up, and then they can warn them. They can put things into place. All these kids that get groomed and they get put on drugs, they've set the law up. So if they get to survive to their 20s and decide they want some justice, they're not going to be listened to in the court about what happened to them as a child in the care system, how they were groomed or raped or abused, because they've got a history of drug abuse. So it's a catch-22 for no justice for these kids, because they can discredit them if they've ever been arrested for anything, which most of these kids end up getting arrested for something, shoplifting, whatever, or they're on drugs because they were put on drugs by the grooming gangs or whoever was abusing them. So these kids, even as adults, there's no justice to be found, because they blocked the elite have made sure that they don't have to answer to what they do. And the rest of them, it filters right down, doesn't it, to the man on the street? But you know, they don't set the laws. They don't set the get out of jail free cards up, you know, to protect themselves.
If you look at the number of children that are going missing, that's what's bothering me. That's a big thing. That's why I'm so keen to get these. We've got some more companies to look at. Yeah. Let me just share this with everybody. If you have a social worker or a social work manager that you suspect has got another motive for taking children away from you,
like business connections with foster care agencies, like that.
Yeah, and they look for hospitals and universities who are specialising in fertility, babies, mothers, anything, all those keywords, babies, mothers, maternity, all these things. Those are the kind of companies that you should be looking out for, as well as the adoption agencies. But you just look up the name. It's Companies House. If you Google it, it's the government. There might be a few companies houses out there, but this is the government's one, you know, that says .gov.uk
so
or something.
Is all they would need then? What would they need to look that information up? For somebody that doesn't know.
Yeah, we don't know what to do. Well, what you do is you obviously get the person's right name or whatever else they're known by. You just write the name down so that you got it. You can type it in perfectly, and then you go to Companies House, and there's a search engine there. You have to look around it, but it's near the front page somewhere. But there is a search box, and you type the name in there, and that will come up with everything that Companies House knows about that one particular person. And then you look at the companies that they're involved with, and it will generally, I mean, it might be not necessarily, but it might be something in this country, like a care agency or adoption agency or something like that in this country. Or it might be a research or a hospital or a university in the Middle East or the Far East, in South Asia, wherever it happens to be. But it would definitely...
Organ transplants.
I don't say that, Sharon, but yeah, you're right. You're right. It is a possibility. But what they're looking for is the English rose gene. That's why English women are young. I know it's not flattering anybody here, but this is why young English girls, British girls, are highly sought after, like the thoroughbreds that they want, and they want those genes. They want those genetics. And so to obviously influence their own genetics, the Brahmin are the white-skinned elite. So they must maintain that white skin, that pale skin, to be recognized as a Brahmin. So it's in there. That's why they want these children there. And it's obvious when you see photographs that these children they've come from the UK. Or they've certainly come from Europe, and this, and it's just going on. And the government don't want to say too much about it because it's a case of like national, state interest or something. Another thing you can do if you've got a social worker who's been really unreasonable, is to go on. You best write this down because it's all one word. What do they know?
Oh yeah, I've got that written down. You sent me that. Explain that to people then, Gerry.
Okay, mate. That's freedom of information requests that you put in, and it's got to be like a general thing. You've got to be saying something like how many children were taken into care last year, and the way that I've found. I mean, I messed about with it myself to find out what sort of information that I wanted. The suicide rates. This is something I couldn't get because most of the evidence that you get is completely false. Most of the statistics and everything, the Office of National Statistics, is complete fakery. I mean, you're head of a department, and then somebody says, oh, the Office of National Statistics wants to know how well you're doing. Oh, we're doing fantastic. Here's the numbers. This isn't the numbers. So you've got to take all that with a pinch of salt. Like, for instance, I couldn't understand why, when I'm looking at academic papers, I used to have access to them, I don't know. But when I had access to academic papers, women were 30% more likely to commit suicide than men. And everybody thinks that's not the case. Well, it is the case. But how do you prove it? Everybody who just picked a number of people and did the research amongst a number of people, that they were coming up with these statistics. So I went to the National Health and I did a freedom of information request just for one town. And the National Health, how many suicides did the National Health or hospitals deal with? The figure that they came back with was bang on what these researchers had done in their towns. It was near enough. It was 33%, whereas the average they had was 30%. So, I mean, I'm not going to quibble about 3%, but there's definitely, the women are the more likely to attempt suicide, the more likely to commit suicide now. I mean, some of them are just 5 years old. 5-year-old girls. The whole thing is just horrible. I mean, you think about it from a child's point of view. Imagine yourself as a small child. You're being molested at school. Don't think the teachers are going to save you, because they don't. We have evidence of this. The teachers standing by and watching. There was one where the woman, Freedom of Information, requested a video, security video, and it came back without the part where the teacher was stood watching it, this gang rape of this young girl. And the only reason that she was managed to get the evidence was because one of the clips that they didn't take off showed the teacher's shoes and trousers. So they knew that this person was facing the actual events as it was going on. So in other words, like you were saying about the NSPCC, Childline, Helpline, all these places, completely not. Domestic violence, oh, that's brilliant. They love that. Oh, they really do love the domestic violence ones, because they can take all that information. So, oh, this woman's really vulnerable, and look at her child's beautiful, and she's blonde and blue-eyed and all the rest of it. Oh, is she really? Oh, well, she's not fit to look after that beautiful young child, is she? And so off they go. Now, so what do you do? What do? You go to the internet, Facebook, and I know it's not, people say it's not appropriate. Yes, it is appropriate, because everything that you do is out there in the open. I could read up today. I could find out what you were doing yesterday or what the day before. If you've done anything wrong, like I say, it'd be all over the place. So we know that you're genuine and sincere in what you're saying. So they will trust you. But the only people that they can trust, because from a young person's point of view, if they tell a teacher, it goes through to social services. We've got 2 women now. So far this year, we've had 2 women dying of cancer. Too afraid to tell the GPs that they're dying and to request the medical attention that they actually do and need. We've had, I don't know, because it's some of the others, there's some of the volunteers who deal with this side of it, but it was at one point when I was reckoning up, from what I'd heard, there was a high proportion of women who suffered domestic abuse, domestic violence, sexual assaults, even rape. And there was nothing they could do about it, because if they went to social services and say, I'm getting raped by this guy that I thought was a nice fella, then there's nothing they can do about it. One of the things that I know from when I worked for the probation service is one of the first things that the paedophiles do is that they molest the child in front of the mother, pretending they're joking and having a laugh and everything. And then it gets a bit too serious, it gets to the groping stage. So then the mother's in a position knowing that if anybody goes to the social services or tells anybody about it, or the police, they will say, well, where were you when this happened? I was there laughing. That's not going to go down well. So they then hold them, oblige them to just keep the secrets and keep it all. As soon as any child mentions secret, all the hackles in your hair, in your back of your head should start coming up. As soon as the child mentions a secret, don't hesitate. Now, where we are today, the police are political. They're not for the public good and public safety anymore. They're purely political enforcements, like the Stasi and people like that, and the SS. They're just the same. They would more like, I tell you how desperate they are. They keep, you would hear that all this racism and all these hate crimes. I've just been putting a post on. There's only, last year, 2019, there was only, the police are spending all the time on hate crime, right? Looking through the internet and everything. What a complete and utter waste of time. There was 150 accusations of racism, racial hate crime. Most of them didn't have any evidence at all. And the ones that were there were either, and I think there was only about a third of them, or even 20% it might have been, but it was very, very small proportion of them were investigated by the police. In other words, there's only about 20% of them had any evidence that there was racism. So that kind of what boils down to about 40 or 50. 70 million people, and there's 40 cases of hate crime for racism. How much of that? So the next time somebody accuses anybody of race or saying, oh, the Black Lives Matter and such, ask them which particular race crime are they talking about? There's only 40 to choose from. So whatever, it's so ridiculous. It really does wind me up, this. The police do not support families anymore. So the children and parents, they have nowhere to turn.
They in fact enable the social workers. They enable the social workers to go in and I mean, the social workers threaten parents and calling the police if they don't sign the paperwork they want them to sign, don't they?
Exactly, that's what
parents have said to me, I wish I'd just said, well, let them come and arrest me then, because I haven't committed a crime. And they couldn't have arrested him, but they will happily pretend to call the police and say, if you don't sign it, we'll get the police. So, they're complicit in that. And then they go around with the social workers to hospitals. How can you go into that ward knowing that mother's just given birth and just take that child away from that mother? There's no birth certificates. They just go into the hospital. Nobody else can get in to see them. The police are helping them snatch a child.
Yeah. And
often built on cases that are from the past, and they've just regurgitated them and made it look really bad because there's a new baby on the way. And
that's not the right timing. Well, they should be doing that. The child's development into a human being depends on those first few weeks, the closeness and comfort and everything else from the mother. And if they don't get that, it happens that sort of sets the pattern for the rest of their life. A lot of children, what happens to them in childhood when they lose contact with a parent? People say the children are resilient, always quite happy without you, etc. That's just to upset parents. They're not happy at all. And they're absolutely not happy. And they certainly will not be when they get older. That's when everything rebels. Even a bad father is a good thing in a way, because it teaches children what not to be when they grow older, and the kind of man not to be attracted to. I mean, you think about it, if she's had an aggressive, violent kind of dad, I'm not saying if she's been beaten stupid, that's different, but if the father was aggressive and challenging and getting angry all the time with everyone, she's not going to be attracted to a man like that when she gets older. She's going to think, I want somebody who's a total opposite to where my dad was. My eldest daughter, she came up with a fantastic thing for any daughter to say. She said, you were a good dad because you learned what not to be from your father, and you learned how to love from your mother. So that put me in good stead.
I think and all of these parents being accused of potential future emotional risk of harm to their children because of being in domestic abuse, in most cases, like you say, parents, when these children that have come from dysfunctional families, for want of a better word, they strive to be a better parent than what they have.
Of course they do.
And give the children what they felt they didn't have. They don't automatically just become the abuser, which is what they try to make out. Oh, you've been abused, so you're going to be an abuser. No, that's bullshit. That's just a narrative that serves their purpose with the crystal ball of, well, we think because you've been through trauma, you're going to cause trauma for your child. Well, no, you're actually just now about to cause trauma to my child for the rest of its life by removing it from a family. Even if the parents aren't fit for purpose, there's other family members that would step up if given the opportunity, and they're sidelined all the time. They're told no. I mean, a lot of cases they do put them with the family member, but then they cause so much bitterness between those family members by interfering that they break down that family relationship, and then the child loses out again, even if they are with the family. There's restrictions on who they can see in that family and who you're allowed to protect them from. It's crazy.
But I know that they will take full advantage of the fact that children do seem to, they don't know what's going on. They're totally amazed. I remember in my own childhood, you have no idea what's happening. You just sort of go with the flow. People say, I'll go there and do this and do that. You don't even think about it. So you can't make sense of it. So you can't follow it. You don't know what's happening. You think, well, maybe it's like this for everybody. And then, of course, obviously, when you get older, it wasn't. It's a bit like when I left Glasgow. I should consider myself to be quite well off in some respects. And I was an only child, so whatever money was available for most of my life anyway, at that time, whatever money was available, it was getting spent on me. It wasn't a great deal, but it was, and it wasn't until I actually moved, and then I thought, oh my God, well, we're really poor. Like, well, the deprivation and the poverty. I'm thinking, oh yes, well, I can't claim that because everybody else was exactly the same, and so they were just as deprived and impoverished as the rest of us. So, quick funny story about two of my mates at school, they're brothers, and they were talking about poverty and everything, and they said, and one of them had a tie and it was quite broad, and then the other one had a tie and it was quite thin. He says, our mother couldn't afford two ties, so we bought one and cut it in half. So they that's why they're different kind of school ties. But yeah, the poverty was there, but you laughed about it. But
you'd be accused of emotionally abusing your child by doing that, wouldn't you, nowadays?
Probably, yeah. You'd have to be careful, wouldn't you? I mean, I think back, God, my aunties and such, some of the things that they did, God, they probably would be arrested, yeah, if they were anywhere else. But we don't want to be the exact image of our own, especially people. There's only two people. The only people that can harm you are people you care about, and that's the only people who can harm you. And if you've got such a relationship where you don't like a member of your family, you're not going to grow up to be like them. You're going to, like you say, you're going to be the opposite. When I was doing childcare and first went into it, I had to keep it all quiet from my own past because I knew that social services would say, well, no, you're not allowed near children because of what happened to you. Actually, like you say, I was totally the opposite frame of mind. I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen to other kids. And I did. And I was surprised at how many other people were there for exactly the same reason. Yeah. And that was heartwarming to know that this actually goes on. At the same time, I'm going to get back to this point. Anybody who has access to children for no reason, then that you've got to be so careful about what they're doing and why they're doing it. And and this hijacking of the police force for political agendas has taken them away from child protection. Now child protection, as we've seen at Rotherham and Rochdale and all the other places, and Bradford and all over the place, we've seen that it depends, the perpetrators depends on who the perpetrators are as to whether they're going to be protected or not. And some of the way that you can't have two systems, they're just incompatible with each other, totally incompatible. I was on this occasion when I first started doing voluntary work. I was a single dad, so I mean, there was never any problem about me getting a DBS check or anything like that. So I was helping out in a nursery, and we had a lot. Sorry, excuse me. We had a lot from ethnic minorities, and some of the stories that I heard from these women was horrific. And one of the women was telling me, I said, "Are there no like women's organisations out there for you?" And she says, "Oh yes, there is, but they will tell you they're owned and run by the council, financed and run by the council." And when she went, this particular woman was telling us, when I went there, they said, "Go back to your violent husband and tell him you're sorry." Oh dear.
Well, it's like the counselling
so bad,
service.
it's funny.
It's like the counselling services set up for these girls, these victims of grooming. They're told not to talk about, what they look like or anything like that. They're not allowed to talk about. It's not a counselling service. It's just a protection service, isn't it?
Yeah, they're covering it up. You and I, we're coming to the stage now where I think it will happen in the future. Hopefully, I might just be alive long enough to just see the start of it. But eventually, social work people will arrange for their own social work. The government will give you a budget for whatever you want, whatever you need, and instead of giving it to a company or an organisation, they'll give it to you. And so long, but you'd have to spend it on getting the social service that you need. So that if women, but I tell you how that would work, because it's the only way it can work now to keep politics out of it. If a woman has gone into in a violent relationship and she can't get rid of him, then she should be able to say, "Well, I want this refuge, and then I want the police to come and arrest this man, take him away, and to get some kind of, to get him out of my life altogether." And then she can move back to be with her friends and family. But because at the moment, that means that the women are the abused party. They are in control. But another one that does, like from my own perspective, that would work very well would be if the father sees his child being abused by the mother or maternal family, he can then say, "I'm taking my child," and then argue out in court afterwards. You just need evidence. That's all you need. But at the moment, you've got no chance whatsoever. The amount of people or sheeple, the way that they fall and don't actually think things through for themselves, is it's absolutely appalling. This thing like with racism. I mean, let's just keep in mind 150 allegations in a year, 70 million people. What the hell are they crying about?
Yeah.
So let's just get this out of the way. The racism it's not a thing. It's not a problem. Maybe in their mind it's a problem, but it isn't. It's like me saying, "Oh, well, people are anti-Scottish." I've only come across one person in my life who was anti-Scottish. One person in all the people that I've met in my life, and I'm nearly 70. And then there's only one person I can say, "Well, he was anti-Scottish." I used to call them Sassenachs, and they would call me a joke and all sorts. But that was fun. That was just having a laugh. This wasn't hatred. It was just guys mates having a laugh with each other.
I got called Sassenach in the office in Aberdeen when I lived there.
I did that all the time.
I got called far right in my in North Yorkshire, didn't I? So there you go.
I used to say, "Oh, you're Sassenachs," with an inordinate fondness for sheep. But yeah, come on, let's lighten up a wee bit. Anyway, but getting to that, and then, when it comes to protecting children, anybody who can't take a joke, that's something to watch out for. But these young women were trapped in that, and the story that came up time after time after time, these women would meet somebody at usually secondary school, and it'd be a young guy brought up to have a sense of humour and to have a nice personality, be friendly, polite, respectful, and they've never been treated like that before. Naturally enough, they just fall head over heels with these young guys. Now, one of them was telling me that her brother got her into an abandoned building, held a loaded gun to her head, and says, "I'll blow your effing brains out if you talk to that lad again." Other women were telling me, not in so many words, they weren't explaining, but they said there were repercussions. There would be repercussions. One of them said it could either be being arranged to marry a relative. One young woman, she went for she was looking forward. She was actually swatting for her A levels at school, and the father rolled in one day and said, "Oh, you're going to marry your uncle." He was 42, he couldn't even speak English. Anyway, they sent her off to that land, far off land, and she was living in a dirt floor shed with this guy. Anyway, that was a horror story, but if she didn't do that, the alternative was FGM. You look at the statistics, they're always girls between the age of 7 and 15. That's the kind of age where like children, girls are and boys, they're learning to socialize with each other, make friendships, and and learn how to respect each other and have get along together. And no, they don't get along with white boys. They're not allowed to, and that's what's actually happening. And those girls are on their own. Nothing whatsoever is done to help them. Now, you can't have two systems like that in operation. It just cannot happen. This is just we need. This is the problem that I have, and I have to try and ease this with my conscience. I can only help white children, because if any minorities are being threatened and they're in a risk, what can I say? Nobody's going to believe me. And when I have had people that joined us, they haven't been any use at all. They didn't tackle it either. And I can see why the grooming gangs got away with it, because everybody's terrified. It's terrorism. Everybody's terrified of saying anything. I mean, when you can watch a child being gang raped and then say, "Oh, I didn't say anything because I'll be accused of being a racist." No, there's something wrong there.
It is. It just shows the social conditioning over the last 50 years, doesn't it, really?
Yeah. If they can get away with it, they will do. The only alternative way of dealing with this, and I know people are going to be, disagreeing with it, but I'm telling you, it's the lesser of the two evils, to make an alliance, an agreement with your ex-partner. No matter how violent they've been, no matter how aggressive they've been, you've got to say, right, the children are a different thing altogether. You can't presume that the law is going to be on your side, and you cannot presume that.
I want to speak particularly to those parents who use the child as a way of upsetting the other parent. They use them as a weapon, they use them as a tool, they use them, or they report the other parent to social workers, and they tell lies, and they make him out to be such a bad parent. Well, that's going to blow up in your child's face.
It is,
because once that battle begins and accusations start getting thrown around, the courts will turn around and say, sort it out or we'll take the child. Because if you can't sort it out between you, neither of you are fit to decide who has the child. And unfortunately, in a lot of those cases, the more narcissistic of the two ends up with the children, whether it's good for them or not.
That's right,
They'll happily take your money in court to fight your partner over contact with children, but that doesn't guarantee anything. That partner can, if it's the more narcissistic that isn't bothered about putting the children in the crossfire or using them, or even have any concept of what they're doing to their own children, in this little game they play, the other parent can have a court order saying you get this child so often in the week or month or whatever, but they're not going to stick to it. And what is the parent going to spend another however many grand in court trying to get them to stick by this plan? Or you're going to have this constant battle every time you want to see your child because they're being controlling. That's when they'll go, well, we'll take the children off if you've got enough complaints. So then the child ends up in the care system. And I need parents, you really need to think about, if you're trying to hit your ex-partner with a social worker, the only thing you're doing is harming your child and potentially putting your child in the care system. And it doesn't mean you're going to win your child by making out that they're the worst parent. If you can't work together for your child, you need to find family members that can. You need to get a family group conference. You need to bring these people together. You need to say, look, there's too much emotion between us. There's too much water under the bridge. There's a lot of hatred and resentment or whatever, because they've split up for a reason. Other family members will see that person is not putting that child first. They're being selfish or they're being vindictive. So when you've got the other family members, this is the problem with the splintered families. They've damaged families so much. They've attacked the nuclear family so much that people are saying, I don't have any family. I don't get on with my mum. I don't get on with my siblings. And, you know, nobody wants to say I'm the black sheep of the family. Well, you know, families need to put that aside for the younger generation in their family. That's their next generation, and they're not getting it, are they? I'm amazed by how many people don't put those children first, are too spiteful or selfish to, you know, it's all me, what about me? Well, put your child first and the rest will fall into place. Focus on the well-being of your child and the benefit of the people around them. Like you say, even if they're not the best parent, I had a rule when with my kids, if what happened at the dads, as long as they were safe, which I knew they were loved, so there was no problem with that. They might not parent in the same way that I would. They might have different ways of doing things,
values,
which is
maybe
split up anyway. And it's got as long as your child's safe, you've got to allow that parent to be that parent in the way that they see fit with that child, even if you have to correct any behavior when they come back, because the rules are different in your house. If you can't make it easy for your child by having similar rules, bedtimes, routines, things like that, just to make it easy on your child, so that the crossing between the two isn't so confusing or frustrating, or, you know, it does affect your time with your child if you're battling against the other parent and what they're filling their heads with, if you like, because they can be vindictive. But until they start looking at the child and see that sometimes that behavior from that child is because of what they are doing to them with the ping pong thing, and also a child cannot be put off a good parent, no matter what that parent, to be vindictive, says about that parent, the absent parent. If that parent steps up and does and shows love and care to that child and has their best interest, you cannot put that child against that parent, because they see it for themselves. They feel it from that parent, and they won't believe that. They'll just grow up to think that you're vindictive and you've ruined a relationship they could have had with a parent, and he'll come back on you. If you've got good reason to keep them away, fine. If they're a risk to them, if the lifestyle's putting them at risk, anything like that, you should have the right to protect your child. Social services shouldn't come in and say, because that absent parent gets up to X, Y, and Z, you won't be able to protect them, so we're taking the child away. It's about getting that community up, isn't it? Volunteer groups and like mother groups for parents to talk to each other and support each other, rather than going through the authorities. And you know,
one of the things I noticed when we took the charity into Scotland, the first thing they do is they look for kinship care. And they do like a hierarchy of who's the next in line to look after that child and work their way down. There's always somebody. I tell you how I know that, and I tell you how easy it can become. There was one Christmas where I was at the kids' home in Leeds, big one, and the staff were a bit angry with me because I was telling tales about them and stuff that I didn't agree with. So one Christmas, they all agreed en masse that they were all going to take Christmas off. That would have left me in charge of one hostel. It wasn't a problem. They tried to do it before and it didn't matter a damn. We had a great time. And so, because I could do what I wanted with, you know, silly, stupid games that we had. And, kind of gladiators, that was it. They were beating the crap out of each other with these pillars on sticks and stuff. I wouldn't have been able to do that if the rest of them had been there. But anyway, getting back to the point, this Christmas came along and the administrator had arranged for all these 17 kids, all bar one, all 16 kids, as whatever there was, to stay with one member of the family. So that means there was at least one family home where these children could go and they were welcome and they'd be cared for and looked after. So what was the excuse for the rest of the year? Anyway, getting back to this young boy that was left, for a lot of tragic, horrible reasons, he was unable to stay with any family. But anyway, so the point was, I think he was only about 10 or 11 at the time. He'd be 11 maybe, I think, something like that. And so we went to the DVD shop and we got every Fast and Furious film in the place and everything like it, you know. And then he was sat in front of the television and the chef had made nice meals for us and all that, ready prepared. And then I took him his pudding, which was a family-sized tub of his favourite ice cream and a spoon. He said, "Is all that mine?" I says, "Yep." I says, there's 2 more in the fridge. So he had 3 days where he had a family-sized tub of his favourite ice cream every day. And all we could hear all around, because the place was empty, all we could hear all around was the cars going, and he was in his element. But that was, there was one, a quick example was a young boy, he adored his nan. I totally adored his nan. He says, can I go see my nan? I said, well, you're not supposed to, but I'll make sure you've got enough bus fare. Now, one of the things that he used to say, one day he rang up, the night staff were there usually on duty, and this time in the evening, and he rang me up. He says, Gerry, can I sleep over at my nan's? And I said, oh God, mate. I said, I can't because of the court orders and everything else like that. Well, we used to do a call back to make sure they were where they said they were, you know. And so I wait till I do the call. Let me think while I do your call back. And so I had to think about it, and I rang him back, and I says, ring me back when you've missed your last bus. Night staff were hilarious. So as everybody got to hear about it, the night staff would come out of the office and say, oh, Gerry, young guy's just phoned, and he's missed his last bus. Oh, dear, that's a tragedy. Oh, he'll have to stay at his nan's. And all the kids are just roaring with laughter. Yeah, right. But that's how ridiculous it is. I mean, come on, these children want to be with their nanas and their uncles, and you must have had your favourite relatives yourself, and you could stay with them as long as you possibly could. And that's what children. That's what we need. So that's what I'm thinking. We need to be planning, such as you and I, need to be planning an organisation that can work together with other organisations all together on this, where we can provide all the social services that are being refused to mothers. If a mother has problems, she's maybe drinking too much, and she knows she's drinking too much, but the anxiety and everything, okay, let's just put what I want to do eventually with the charity is for people who are not in any marital problems whatsoever, relationship problems, and they've just got a child and everything's looking hunky-dory, but just in case, I'd like them to subscribe so that we can provide any services that they might need in the future. Because that way, because what I would do with that, I would say, give us 2 members from each of your family, 2 family homes from each of your family, where if anything goes wrong, these people have already signed a form to say, yes, we're happy for the children to stay at this home. We're happy for the children to stay at that home in an emergency. And so, well,
I used to, the last job I was doing for the council was the family group conference coordinator. And that was basically going around all the family members on both sides, friends of the family, neighbours, whoever they felt they could trust or had some connection to the child, get them all together to meet, write it all up on a plan. And I've said this to other people as well. If you can get your family members together and write up a plan of your own, when they're knocking at your door, we say, well, actually, if I start drinking again, this family member's doing this. We've got a plan all here, signed up and agreed on before anything even happens. So we've got what they call it, plan. So that
contingency plan,
that's it. I was going to say it wrong, so I didn't say it. But
but there's no need for social services to get involved if they've already signed and agreed to that. What do you need for? I mean, a little boy's going to stay, or a little girl's going to stay with her favourite auntie, uncle, whatever. So what's wrong with that? It's already been agreed. I mean, like when my daughter went through times, I was through bad times. Her marriage broke down. There was just no question. I was there for her, and I was looking after my granddaughter. I was the main carer for my granddaughter for a long time, and I loved it. It was one of the happiest days of my life because I had all the time and as much money as I needed to spend. With a routine, it was just fantastic. I won't go on about it because it really was a joy to be doing that. Did you hear,
Gerry, in Scotland, I read somewhere recently that, I can't remember what the woman's name was, but she's resigned now. She, I can't remember if it was what party it was either, but they were proposing that at birth, this was in Scotland, at birth, this child would be allocated a social worker, and they would oversee the family, and if there was any problems, they'd be able to step in straight away. But they shot themselves in the foot apparently, because when they were trying to explain it to the youth group, for their party, whichever party it was, when they were explaining it to them in kind of a younger terms for them to understand, they basically said, oh, but the parents would still have some responsibility. And then people started going, well, wait a minute. So the idea was that every child born would be allocated a social worker at birth. And then they would watch for the family to make mistakes, and then they could swoop in and have as much responsibility of that child as the parents do. But like I say, she ended up resigning or something because it all got exposed for what they were trying to do. And they talk now, don't they, about putting social workers in schools, which is dangerous.
No, that's wrong. They are in schools. It's totally, completely wrong. They're just looking for excuses. I was just thinking then, what I'm going to be doing eventually, but I'll probably be taking this to solicitors, the charity to solicitors, because we're getting a lot of favour in as much as that we can support families that are trying to get improved contact with the children. And I think they are kind of waking up a wee bit. And what I'm thinking is, if we introduce this scheme where people arrange, like what you do, you could handle that, couldn't you? The sibling, with the relatives taking care, you could do all that stuff and arrange all that, because that would be just perfect. If you would like, as soon as they subscribe onto this, they could get in touch with you, or we could put them onto you, refer them to you to sort out the family arrangements should anything go wrong.
I would happily do a family group conference for anybody that felt that would help them bring the family together, and also get them all involved with the child and the care of the child, and help the parents out with the issues. I would more than be, be more than happy to do that with any family that wants. The problem is, when I have offered to do that, they go, well, they won't talk to me, and sometimes it's too far down the line, and the social workers made so much of a problem between them that the family don't want to come together and talk, because they've kind of all fallen out. The parent of the child is upset with the sibling that's looking after the child, because they're getting told by the social worker, or don't let them see the child, and then that causes problems between the two siblings or family members, whoever they might be. And so the child, again, misses out, loses out, and the family gets... So it's easier if it's at the early stages, when families are still talking to each other, at least. And at the early stages as well, where you think, well, it could potentially, my child be put into care. I need to get the family together, to come all together and sit down and we say, right, these are the issues, these are what they're picking at, these are the risks, who can do what, when and how. And we'll write that up, we'll all sign it, we'll date it, agree it. And if anybody comes knocking at the door, we've got that as evidence that we're working together as a family, and they've got no reason to come in and try picking apart, because they'll go as far back as they can in records to find a problem with their family members, or, your father did some time in prison. Well, I wasn't even thought of them. They'll dig and dig and dig. If they've made their mind up, they'll dig until they find something, or they'll just lie about it, or they'll put that suggestion to the court, like you say, and then the parents and the solicitors that were paid by the council as well, they're on a good thing by the council, they'll go in there whatever they want. That parent's got nobody in that courtroom defending them, or putting their child first, except for them. None of that court's putting that child first.
That's why I'm hoping to develop this standing as an expert witness because now that it's all online, it's so easy. I don't have to travel around. That was the only thing that put me off, actually, was having to travel around the country all over the place. I didn't want to do that, and I didn't want to charge people for hotel bills and stuff. I don't want to be doing that, because it cost them hundreds of pounds, and I didn't. It's one thing I did want to avoid was charging anybody extra money, but. Yeah, I think that's a goal, actually, that to have a project whereby parents agree, for maybe members of both the family, without falling out over it, for goodness sake, but just an agreement. Yeah, in an urgent situation, no matter who's guilty or who's innocent, let's just sort the kids out first, and then you can argue about it between yourselves. But at least it keeps social services out of it. I mean, if they're having a fallout,
it breaks down so many barriers as well, because when I was visiting each family member, because what I would do is visit each family member in person, arrange on the phone, and then go see them in person, explain what the situation was, and ask them if they wanted to be involved, if they want to help in any way, and what would they, you know, what's their view on the situation. And you find the happy medium. Then you can, you know, they might have issues with that person because they don't like the lifestyle, of they've fallen out over something, or they've done something really bad to them. But when you take the focus back to the child, well, you wouldn't have to have any contact with that person. You would only need to contact them. You know, if this family member gets in touch with you, then you know that you're being called in to do your bit. There's ways around it. You can have a plan where the family members that don't, you know, even in the meeting room, when you're all in the meeting room, just don't sit opposite the person that you don't like. You know, everyone gets a chance to speak. It's there on the board for everybody to kind of agree to. If there's anything they thrash it out amongst themselves. They come to that plan. All I would do is come back into the meeting once they've decided on their plan, and it's their plan, and make sure that everybody's happy with it and everybody said what they needed to say. You
tape it out and get them to agree.
Yeah, I would type it out. I would take that away, type that out, and then send it to all the family members. They would sign it, and they've got an agreement with each other. Then, you know, whoever was there they sign it to say that that's what they're agreeing to do. I mean, it doesn't always work. They might say, "Oh, yes, I'll do this and do that," but then when it comes to it, something's changed. But having that basic plan, what you can pull on and say, look, bring it back to the child, bring it back to the care of the child. This is a member of your family that we're protecting. Or, you know, a lot of the times, you know, if the parents are drinking too much and the other grandparents don't agree with that behaviour, and they've tried and they've got frustrated with their child because they won't give up the drink, that's when they need to have that agreement saying, look, if we get to a point where we think your drinking's out of hand, we're going to step in and take your child. You've got to agree that in this family meeting, that if things get so bad, we will step in to protect that child. And it is about protection. It's not about somebody.
Of course it is. That's why it's only doing it for the protection. Yeah.
That's why it's got to be a whole group agreement thing. So nobody's taking the control.
Well, that's how they operate in the safest communities. I'm going to say you'll probably find that domestic violence will probably drop right down, and there will be no need for it because there's not that risk of losing your children. And
well, there's even, you know, having a plan for when somebody's likely to be aggressive, or at the times when they're aggressive, or whatever. I mean, it could be women when they do the period or whatever, they might be violent, but it's having a plan for that. Say, I know the person to do it, you know, but if you've agreed it, and all the
turn into monsters.
But it is. It's like, so you say, right, I'm going to go down to my friend's house and have a bottle of wine, and I'm going to stay there tonight because I'm, you know, I'm feeling that way out. Or, you know, it's recognising in each other. Can you go for a walk down the road? Or it's having that plan, but you decide that plan for yourself because you know yourself, you know the people around you better than anybody else. It's no point in social work coming in, you've got to do X, Y, and Z. If it's completely unreasonable, it's not in your, you know, everyone should have a right to have the family that they want in a way that they want it, as long as the children are safe. It's not for somebody to come in and say, well, I don't like that you don't put your washing away as soon as it's dried, or I don't like that you've got toys all over the floor because they could trip over them. You know, this is the sort of stupid stuff they're going in and saying. You know, it's crazy. So the key is to build our families back up, to care about our families more, to build our communities up. And the little town that we live in, or the little area of that city that we live in, we've got to make that our community in every community, so that we're looking out for each other. Like when I was a kid on our street, on our estate, you know, there was loads. We played on with all the other kids on the estate. We all looked out, you know, my mum and all the other mothers and fathers looked out for each other's children. You knew that you were playing out with that kid or whatever. If there was a little bit of ruction between them, you know, parents might get involved. They sort it out. They're back playing again in an hour later. That's how it was. It seems like the memories I have of what family life was like is disappearing into some sort of craziness that it's never going to be the same again. You're never going to be able to have a family life that you've known again because they've changed everything and they've taken over and interfering with family life too much. And now with this COVID saying that kids can't come home from university and things like that. I wouldn't be sending my kids if that was the case.
Well, a lot of people aren't sending their children to school because of what's going on there.
Yeah.
You know,
No.
it's absolutely appalling the way the man. But the domestic violence will drop off. We know that for a fact because it's. I got this wrong for some. I better be careful. But it's 0.46% of cases. You'd have to live. I think it's 3 lifetimes before you'd witness a domestic violence incident. It's so low. Compare that with Bradford, and it's every 4 years. So that's the difference between it. Now, the reason why there's such a stark difference is because you give people responsibilities for their family, they tend to behave responsibly. I used to go back to Glasgow and I couldn't figure out why it was that I never actually turned to drink, and I never really turned violent, and all the sectarianism. I tried to avoid that as much as possible. And even though I used to go to the boxing gym with one of my uncles was a boxer, and then so it was all like the family. My mother was a boxing groupie, so I was always it was always something that I did. But I never got into fighting, you know, from entertainment, and I would never cause any problems whatsoever. And the reason why was because I was looking after my little sister. I had responsibilities to look after my little sister because her mother was very poorly, and so that made me think, well, if I get arrested for anything, I'm not going to be able to get back and care for my little sister. So that made me behave myself very, very quickly, and it made me stay in sometimes when I wanted to go out. And I think, well, no, because if my mother was ill, I'd stay and make sure everything was all right. But I stopped going out altogether actually before her mother died. But that was. You give people responsibilities and you will immediately cut domestic violence down by about 90% straight away. And then the kids are not going to get into crime the way that they do. Because the one thing that they used to say, and when I looked after these lads that were getting into trouble, well, who cares? And it stopped them in their tracks when I said, I care. And that, whoa, that's true. Yes, it is true. Well, you're in my care, you're my responsibility, and I don't want you getting into trouble. And I used to say, look, I don't want you screwing your brains up, so don't take drugs. And they agreed with that. And even though I smoked myself, I even convinced them to stop smoking. Me taking the mickey out myself, really, by ridiculing how bad it was. And that, and these children will be. They'll be much better behaved. They'll have ambitions. They will have. This is how in some of these places. This is how children get respect, and it's how men get respect by being a good father, by being responsible for your own children, and for caring for them. And if you deny those children that, then you are actually destroying the child more than you're destroying the father. And it's
and I think
something you've got to get grips with. Yeah.
I was just going to say that, unfortunately, when you look over the last 30, 40 years, they've damaged the structure of the family so much. Yeah. There's so many kids that don't have that father figure or that role model, or that, you know, people fall out with family members. And I think we've been manipulated into a very selfish society where it's me, and we're not looking at, I mean, the damn parents, they say he failed with the first child, so, you know, we'll take every child after that off them. Well, I've learned so much from my children. I got a lot of things far worse wrong with my first child. I'd learned a bit by 4.5 years later when I had my second child, and that's the beauty of it, is that when we focus on our children, when we care about their well-being, we learn so much about ourselves, because our behavior gets reflected back to us. We see how we impact on them. And so we usually we moderate our own behavior, or we consider how we're behaving, because it's affecting our children that we love. And so parents learn and grow through every child, I think, most parents.
They do.
And
they learn from
being denied that.
Yeah. They will learn from your mistakes, from other people's mistakes. I'll tell you a quick funny one about that. There was I had obedience trained dog. I literally like doing these competitions and stuff, you know, with dog obedience and that. And with Labradors, usually I always had Labradors. And anyway, so one of the ways that they were so well behaved and so calm and everything else, I gave them responsibilities, a bit like you would do with a child, you know, like your own child, probably, you know, you give them some responsibilities of what they're supposed to do. And that was what one of the dog's jobs was to bring up my clean socks and underwear if I decided. I used to have a shower most nights because I was a building contractor, but occasionally I liked to soak in a bath. And then the dog would bring my underwear and stuff such as that up. So my daughter, one of them, had no modesty whatsoever, and she just badges into the bathroom. And I'm, for God's sake, what are you doing? And then she's going, I'm just having a pee, shut up. And all this. And I went, oh, Janine. And then she says, what's the dog doing? I said, he's cleaning my ears. He likes to clean my ears. So she went, oh, that's disgusting. I said, Janine, you're sat there, legs akimbo, having a piss while your dad's in the bath. You're talking about the dog cleaning my ears has been disgusting. What the hell? Oh dear. Yeah, but everybody's their own.
A day in the family life.
Yeah, that's what family lives are about, I suppose. At least it's a funny memory to me anyway. But those are the kind of things that, that if men don't have those responsibilities, then they do turn out entirely different. I tell you what comes as quite interesting to me as well is it interferes with the relationships in older life. They get so, well, if I love you, will you run away from me? The same as my father did, or the same as my mother did. And people need to get it into their heads that a natural parent has an instinct to look after that child. It's in there. It's actually, I'm thinking about writing a book about this because it's my special interest, if you like, from my social studies. And it's about biological determinism. And it's the sort of thing you'll think, oh yeah, come on, I understand it completely. If I tell you, it's how we're programmed to work and function as a human being. We're not like cattle. We don't just like care for kids and then once they're fed and everything, we just walk away from them. We're not like that at all. We have grandparents who play a role in the family. We have younger children who play a role in the family. All these different things where everyone has a role and has a purpose. Even this is one of the theories about this is that if we all bred like cattle, if every single one of us had the chance of having children, who would get on with the rest of the stuff that has to be done? And so you needed a certain percentage. And I've got to tell you, from my experience, gay people are great surrogate parents. You think about it, they are the really, really good parents. If you want your daughter to be really strong and assertive and not stand any nonsense from men, how about a lesbian couple looking after her, a lesbian woman looking after her for a while, saying, oh, men are rubbish. but that's the kind of thing where they do actually step in. If you notice all the artists, a lot of the scientists, because they've got that time, they're not distracted by families, they've got all the time to use their imagination and their creative abilities to come up with all these inventions and works of art and write these books, etc. So we do need a certain percentage of the community that will not marry and not reproduce. Hence, we have gay people. So they have a role in family life as being there for emergencies and to do the things that others cannot do. But I think we're going to have to get back to that way of living like a proper community, the way that a community actually functions. And you know yourself, the only thing you care about is the children, are they safe? I remember going back, took my daughters back to Glasgow.
Can I just add to what you were saying about my nephew's gay and my kids love him to bits and it's they have a right laugh with him, it's like everyone's got a role, haven't they? And I think a lot of gay people would agree that them trying to add this paedophilia tag onto their letters, LGBT
sexuality, that's rubbish. Yeah,
and this transgender business, it's if you're gay, you're gay. If when they try to tell children in school, at primary school, that they could have been born into the wrong body, that's not learning to love yourself for who you are, is it? It's learning to decide. Anyway.
Aren't you at that age? You're confused to start with.
But that is doing the exact opposite of teaching children to love themselves first and care for themselves in order to care for others. And when they're teaching you, you've got to care about other people. Well, no, well, that starts with yourself, because if you're not looking after yourself, if you don't care for yourself, you're not in a position to care for other people. So they're missing that, they confusing them instead into thinking that they may have been born into the wrong body, or, you know, am I gay? Am I transgender? Should I be taking medication? All of this sort of rubbish. This needs to stop. This all needs to get out of the classroom and back into the lefty imagination where it belongs. And children should be taught that we're given this body at birth, and we have to learn to love it, and we have to work with it. Whatever disabilities we may have, whatever thoughts we may have, we work through them, and we look to love ourselves unconditionally. That should be the only message for children, is to love yourself unconditionally, and therefore love the people around you for their individuality and acceptance of them. And you're not going to like everybody. That's just life. And you rub people up the wrong way, but that's learning about characters and who you're drawn towards and who you're drawn away from. And it's self-protection as well, because you pick up on the traits of a bully, say, and then you recognize that as you go through life. But when these children are bombarded with watching BBC during the day at school, not being able to communicate with each other, being bombarded with you're in the wrong body, you could be transgender, you've got to love everybody for what they are. Well, you don't, because some people are dangerous and nasty. You've got to love yourself first for who you are, and accept who you are for everything, and then you can accept other people for who they are, because that's not being taught at all in schools at the moment. You know, kids are getting bullied, and the bullies are getting away with it.
Yeah, well, they started teaching children about sexuality at an early age in Scotland, and they're going berserk about it. There was a case where a young boy went home and performed a sexual act on his cousin because of school. Teacher said it felt nice. No, they make their own minds up in their own time, in their own way, in their own preference. It's their choice. It's not ours or nobody else's. And I can't imagine the gall of anyone teaching another man's children about sex. I can't imagine that. I really can't. I mean, I know the kids home did, but it was like just matter of fact stuff. You know, they asked me a question, I'd answer it, and that's the way it would be. And
it should be down again. That's where they've overruled the parents. The parents should, they would prepare for when that question comes, and they would prepare for how they would answer it, or they would put them off until they're ready to answer it. But you, as a parent, you expect those questions to come at some point, and you give them an answer in a child-friendly, safe way. You don't know what your child's being told at school, how they're interpreting what's being told, how the next kid next to them's interpreting it, and then passing it on to your kid, and then it's dangerous ground, and it's sexualizing children. So I just wanted to. I'm aware of the time we've been going for an hour and 3/4. So no, that's I love talking to you, Gerry. Honestly, but it is. There's a lot to cover, and I think that has got to be for parents everywhere of primary age children. You've got to look at. These academies don't have to follow government guidelines on sexual education or religious education. You can look at the government guidelines and think, well, that's okay. But then you've got to look at your individual schools, especially academies, and find out actually what are you teaching my child? And then they put it into science.
Were you trying to organise a separate school?
Sorry?
Weren't you trying to organise an alternative schooling?
Yeah, through all the people involved with like Children Matter and all the groups, we were looking at, we've got to look at an alternative education for these children, because these parents, please just ask the school to look at their education, their sexual education in their school, and what they're being taught. And they put it into science, so it's compulsory. But I think parents need to take a lot of notice of what's going on and what they're being taught, and don't just assume that they're not teaching your child that because you've not heard about it, because before long, like you said, the child's going to come home, do something that they shouldn't have done and wouldn't have done otherwise, because they've been told something at school, especially primary age. It's dangerous.
You don't want them to know about anything like that, do you?
Brave New World, I tell you, I've only read the first few chapters, but honestly, it's terrible. And you just think, they've normalized it in this book. They've normalized it, and that's where we're headed. And people don't. I'm like, it's dangerous times, people. We're not. We're not standing up, putting our head on the line for no good reason. To get called all the names that we get called, far right, racist, conspiracy theorist, whatever you want to call me, right? I'm not bothered.
Yeah.
I'll just keep speaking the truth as I find it, and
Yeah.
I'll keep passing on the information as it comes to me, because people send me stuff all the time and it's great. So I'll just keep, and not doing that because of any benefit to myself, apart from I don't want my grandchildren growing up in that sort of world.
That
is enough drive for me, and that me protecting my grandchildren's future protects everybody else's grandchildren's future.
Yeah.
And if people can't get on board with that and understand the emergency in it, because it's serious, they're already doing it. It's not maybe it'll happen. They're already carrying out that plan. They'll be sexualizing the next generation. 15 years time, another 15 years, it'll be normalized if people don't wake up and see what they're actually doing, and pull your child out of school if you don't want them sexualized, because like you say, in Scotland they're doing it, aren't they? And parents are in uproar.
Yeah, they're in uproar. They're trying to, because of some cultures where it's quite okay to marry an 11-year-old girl, and it's quite okay to marry a 12-year-old girl, but they're not emotionally ready to make any, or even physically ready to accept those kind of relationships. It's just totally, it's really, a lot of it is, I've got to say, is about dominating women.
Yeah.
And we cannot allow that. I mean, we've been through all this history of emancipating women, etc. Here's something that's worth noting as well. None of this was a problem in medieval times. There was, in the history, from what they can find, there was one that made me laugh. I think it was a guy called Wheatcroft, and he says that he was in an argument with this guy, and this guy was saying, well, these women here were warrior princesses. And he says, what makes you think they were princesses? He says, because they were buried with all their finery and weapons and hunting dogs and such, and horses. And he says, if it's ever dawned on you, they might just be warriors. They wouldn't need anything like that. And I'd say something else that I noticed you got a dog. So something else that was quite, I found it quite emotional being a doggy kind of person, but the children were buried with their dog. So that means that every child, way back in history, every child had their own dog. I mean, I think that's just wonderful. And horses were actually part of the family. They were like kept as pets. They were kept indoors. This is, I know, but the way that we behaved and the way that we believe, and you think about it, giving a child a dog, that's a fantastic way of teaching it responsibilities and responsible behavior. So, yeah, but I think, well, if parents can start taking control over what's actually happening, then that way we can protect the children from just handing them over to strangers.
If you don't know about it, you're silently giving consent. If you've not bothered to look for it, if you've not done any research, then you're giving consent blindly, really, by not investigating that.
Between us all, we've got to come up with an alternative, because we cannot allow children just to be passed on to strangers, to be bought and sold.
No.
We can't allow that to happen. We've got to take back control for the parents. What you're doing is fantastic, bringing attention to it. But we've got to get organised. I think we have to get organised and work together.
Well, Gerry, I'm sure we'll be in plenty of contact, and I just keep sending them your way.
I know. Thank you for that. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, sorry, Gerry, there's another one here. But honestly, I just think that there's other people I do pass people on to as well. I give names out of other people that I think can help. But you can't do it all on your own, can you? And I haven't got involved with the legal stuff, so other people are better informed than I am. So I'm there for moral support for anybody if they need it. But as always, it's been great talking to you. And we'll definitely be creating these communities. We've got to. There's no other way.
Thanks again. And the sibling care thing, we'll work on that one. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah. Take care, Gerry. Bye-bye.